G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. Mate, we're in for a real treat today. I'm going to say whatever you're doing, don't multitask. Lend us your ears, and if you're on YouTube, lend us your eyes because this is an absolute cracking episode. We've got Sam Gordon in the house. G'day mate, how you doing?
All right mate, good to be back buddy, thank you.
Mate, thanks for coming back. And mate, there's very few podcasts that I listen to, only because I'm in this space and I choose to tune out. Yours is one of them. Diary for CEO is another. And I'd like to say, mate, first of all, absolute congrats on what you guys are doing.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Mate, I watch with, it's real respect for what you guys are building. It's not blowing any smoke. I'm just saying like genuine respect for what you guys are building over at Australian Property Scout. And we've had the pleasure of working with you guys for some time, a number of mutual clients. And I can just see there's something in the air going on there. There's real change with you at the helm. And I just want to say, mate, kudos to you guys.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it, bud. It's, I think we try and do things a bit differently. We operate a bit of a different way to, I think, most people in the industry. And we're super passionate about it. Like it's not just a business for us. And like almost everyone that's in the team is actually an investor, man. So everyone's so bought into the idea of what we're doing. It's a cool thing to be part of. And I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
No, not at all. I think that is when you talk about it, and we'll talk about the difference that you guys have versus others. But I'd say that is probably one of the biggest differences is when you, if it's good enough for you guys, then it's good enough for a client.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is the biggest thing, especially with the BAs. And we have associates, so then we formulate them into BAs. Because I've never had success in bringing someone directly in as a buyer's agent. People just don't operate the way or think the way that we do as investors. So I love being able to bring in an associate, which a lot of the time is actually an ex-client or a current client. And you give them this opportunity, and we've been able to work with them and deal with them before. And then we can actually mold them into exactly what we want. And the easiest, the absolute base thinking on everything is, would you do this deal yourself? So man, when you think like that about every deal, you're only doing good deals. So
it's such a very good litmus test when it's like, if we could do it, if we'd take it, then it's good enough for us, it's good enough for a client.
100%.
Well done to you, mate. Having a chat to you before, you're looking nice and tan. You come out of Europe recently.
Mate,
a couple of weeks on the Sunshine Coast, you'll get a great tan too.
A lot of cows, a lot of gym sessions, but a bit of a tan as well. It's good.
Excellent. And I mean, overall health and well-being, I mean, you're looking good, feeling good?
Feeling good, man. Feeling great. It's been an awesome year. Yeah, man, it's actually funny. I mean, I guess from a health side of things, I've been a bit of a different training year for me. I've been going a lot of strength rather than kind of more of a fitness route, which I've always done. So still healthy, still fit, but man, I've never weighed 104 before and been benching sets of 130s plus, and here we are. And I love it, but man, it's
How
good.
tall are you?
Different. I'm only 5'11".
That's
so
crazy.
It's a bit of weight on it.
Good calories going in.
And
you hear me talk about this a lot when people come in. I'm like, not that I think aesthetics matter, but I think it's health and well-being, whatever modality people have. I just think it's the most important thing, mate. I think family, health and well-being, and everything starts to fall into place after that.
Yeah,
whether
for sure.
it's business, whether that's relationships, whether that's financial, whatever your goals are, mate, you lock in those two at the very start. Good balanced family life, investment into yourself, into your well-being. I think everything else just falls into place.
I couldn't agree more, man. It's for me, it's a non-negotiable. I got to train this morning before I headed down here.
Well done.
And man, you got to do it. Otherwise, my mind's not sharp. I find the same thing if people, if they don't train around that. I kind of find that a lot of the time on the other side because it gets you into flow. You know what I mean? Kind of gets the cobwebs out, gets you ready for the day. So man, I know you're the same as well. So
mate, awesome. I love it. I think everything else. Again, we talk about the similarities in life. It's your diet goes right, your sleeping goes right, you're around people that really want that same type of level of health and fitness. And I think the same can be said about your team when it comes to, say, investing in property, not drawing along a poor analogy here, but I think the same thing would happen is when you have people that are around you that are aligned the same way, thinking not exactly the same way, but thinking critically and pushing themselves, that brings out the best in others on the journey as well, right?
For sure, man. I couldn't agree more. I think it's a funny thing when you were kind of talking about that. It reminded me of something my dad always told me when I was really young, was you never know who's watching what you're doing, and how you do anything is how you do everything. Yeah. And I remember I used to sweep the shed on a Sunday because we had an old feed mill, right, when I grew up, and that's what I worked on for many years as I was an investor starting out. Yeah. And I'd sweep the shed and clean the shed every Sunday for $30. I'd do 3 hours for $30. And that was what he always told me, how you do anything is how you do everything. So like he'd always make, everything had to be sort of top notch from that very young age from that. And it's funny, man, it very much carries through, you know what I mean? And I think it's the same from a health and fitness side of things. And mate, not everyone's into it, and that's okay. It is what it is. But for me and for a lot of the people that I kind of, I guess I'm very close with, it's just makes part of our life, So yeah, man, interesting.
Mate, anyone that's connected to you, and I don't like to draw on it, but anyone that's connected to you on a social media level, gets to see what I call the highlight reel, Sam Gordon. Credit to you. Obviously, you hard work, good decisions that you've made in the past, and now paying dividends.
Yes.
So they get to see the highlight reel. Maybe the cars, the lifestyle, the trip to Europe recently, for example. But I want to see it talk about the unsexy side of your journey and what people haven't seen and what's gone on behind the scenes to get you to this point. So we can kind of peel back the layers a little bit. Tell us, and if you want to know about Sam's journey, we'll link the other episode we did a while ago.
Yeah.
But take us through, what's it taken to get to this point for you when you reflect a little bit?
Okay, to paint a picture of where I'm at now, I'm pretty much bang on 15 years investing, right? So I bought my first property in November 2009 when I was 19. We're in October 2024, so literally almost 15 years to the date. Yeah, nice. Very, very close. And mate, over 100 rentals now. I've got 80 plus actual standalone properties as well. But when I bought the first one, and then probably literally the first 10 years of investing, it was all graft. It was all sacrifice. It seems a bit silly now, and some people go, do you pinch yourself? You got two supercars. I got a Ferrari and I got a Lamborghini. You know what I mean? Like, all these sorts of things. And people say, do you pinch yourself about this stuff? And for me, it's a funny thing, and I never want to sound vain with something like this, but for me, I almost don't, because I've worked so long and I actually sacrificed so much. I knew it was coming. It was just a matter of time until it was going to come. So then when it came, it's like, no, well, I've earned it. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't take out, $500,000 loans to buy these things. I bought them in cash with profits of sales of things and whatnot. So it's like, man, it's the amount of time it took me to sort of get here. It's been earned. And I think when I really look at the journey, mate, I didn't travel from 21 to 27, 28. It was about 7 years in there where I literally didn't travel.
Peak traveling time, which is where I spent all my money traveling.
100%, man. And I'll finish this story with something on that as well. But during that time, a lot of my mates and everything, they'd travel, they'd buy the nice cars. And man, I was driving around an old 1 ton of shit box, right? Absolute piece of shit. But it got me from A to B. It was cheap to run. And yeah, man, during that whole period of time there, I literally just invested. My holidays were renovations. I'd finish the soccer season and I would line a renovation up, like an end of lease with the end of soccer season, and then I'd shoot off and do it. Or over Christmas, I'd head off to Brisbane, Adelaide, wherever it was, and I'd go renovate a property for 3 weeks. And that was my time off. And that's the way that I kind of ran for like 7 years, man. So you're 100% right. People see the highlight reel of now. And yeah, man, it's come from all those years of dedication and sacrifice. And so often when I'm chatting to clients about this sort of stuff as well, I always say, like, you don't have to do, like, 7 years is a crazy amount of time. Yeah. Like, and if anything, and this is where I'll kind of circle back to what you said before, if anything, I kind of, in a way, if there's some things that I regret, in a way, I do regret a little bit not probably having a little bit more fun. 7 years, I still had fun, but like 7 years of no travel, it was a long time. And yeah, man, it's one of these things of you kind of got to weigh things up. But really, when you look at it, if you sacrificed hard for 1, 2, 3 years, and genuinely sacrifice and really put everything into this thing, all your spare savings, don't, be frugal, work a second job, third job, like all those things that I did during that time frame. I think the difference is, like, now what I could help someone do in 1, 2, 3 years compared to what I did myself in a pinball machine, smashing everything on the way up, making mistakes, learning as I went. I learned a lot of lessons out of it. But having someone be able to lead you through that time frame, you might only need to sacrifice for 1, 2, 3 years to then create a significant result. I look at a lot of the guys that I work with, guys and girls, they come through, and one deposit, man, in the first 12 to 18 months, they're doing 3 deals in the first 12 to 18 months. You know what I mean? Like, man, it took me like 5, 6 years to get to that third property because I didn't understand exactly how to do it. So yeah, man, but it's if you really drill it down, that little bit of sacrifice, I say a little bit, a couple of years, right? But it's peak years. It's a hard time not to travel and to blow it and all the rest of it. But a little bit of sacrifice, mate, you'll look back when you're 30, 35, 40, however old you are when you're starting this little bit, and you'll be so thankful that you did it.
Yeah, nicely said. You grew up, from what I understand, it's humble beginnings, right?
Yes.
So even now to have the Ferrari, the Lamborghini, do you still feel like, hey, mate, this is a bit lavish? Does that cross your mind, or do you go, mate, I'm past that point now, go, look, now's my time?
It's a funny thing, man. Like, I was literally the definition of a low income earner. So it took me 3 years to save my first deposit. I made 39 grand a year when I bought my first home. So I don't know. It doesn't. I don't think too much about it from that side. I think I've earned it, you know, and I think that's the cool thing. Even when I was able to buy it at probably like 31, 32, I still opted not to buy that. Okay. I still bought. So for anyone who knows cars, I bought a Jag F-Type, supercharged V8, still a mad car, beautiful car, still $200,000 car, right? Yeah. But I didn't go and spend $750,000, you know, I spent less than $250,000. So I still felt like I didn't go all out, and I didn't, you know, kind of go. I still sacrificed a little bit from that side. So man, like I look at it and I'm like, no, I've earned it. You know what I mean? Like I've pushed really hard during all this time. And I think anyone who gets to those levels where they genuinely earn it off their own back, not handed to you. I think if you handed it to you, I think it would be a different thought process in your own mind. But I think when you've gone through it, and nothing feels better than earning it. Nothing feels better than actually winning yourself. You know, it's and the sacrifice, like, it hurts during that time. But let's say if it took you, let's say 12, 18, 24 months to get to 3 properties because you've saved hard and you've bought the right deals and all the rest of the sort of thing. Do you think you're going to feel pretty mad at the end of that? And then it gets easier. When you understand the game, it actually gets easier. Those first few are the hardest to get. But if you're working with the right people, you understand how to play the game. It just gets easier from there. And then you can obviously move so much faster.
Do you see others trying to shortcut, say, the success that you've had, and they're trying to shortcut it? There's ways that you say you can fast track it, but not shortcut it.
Not shortcut. No.
So what do you say to people when you can see they're trying to take the shortcut, for example? How do you tell them to?
What sort of shortcuts? Like, give me an example of a shortcut.
Yeah, look, I mean, you talked about they didn't earn it. So it's like the bank of mum and dad is going to deliver.
Yeah.
It's, hey, I'm on a good income, therefore I can go and lease the vehicle, for example, as opposed to save for it.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's some of the shortcuts that I see.
Yeah. I think when it comes to like the bank of mum and dad, if it's going to take you 12 to 18 months to save that first deposit, or the bank of mum and dad can help you with a deposit to get into your first deal, man, we're all given different opportunities at different points in life. And realistically, if you could do it and then let's say in a 12-month window, pay them back and still have 2 or 3 properties under your belt, it's okay. Like if that's what you had to do to sort of get your foot in the door to get started. I know you've had Jason Titus on the show. He's obviously one of the BAs over at Australian Property Scout.
And I love that style, which is it's the guarantor. It's not like here's the cash.
Yeah.
I'm gonna depend on my parents for the cash. I think that's the difference, which is I've got the ability income wise for a guarantor, but I'm just going to cash my check, my inheritance check early.
Yeah. Well, man, this is the thing. Yeah, exactly right. So, and so he had the 10% plus closings on that first place that we bought together. Yeah. Although, you know, that he was sourcing within APS as well. And then within 6 months, I think it was, he'd refinanced them off and actually refinanced them off the debt. You know what I mean? So like they were gone and he was at his 90%. And again, he paid his dues. He had to wait another, I think 3 months, he valued it again. He had another 50 grand. So he pulled that out and then he was able to go and buy a deal. But man, if he didn't do that, he would have missed the start of Perth because that was right at the bottom of Perth, you know, very early 2021. So yeah, man, it's play the hand you dealt. When you got those opportunities, still take them. Not everyone has the opportunities, but when it's there, if that's what you have available to you to get started in the market, yeah, man, I wouldn't forsake it to be able to say one day, I never had a handout from anyone, because being 12 months earlier into the market could fast track you a lot further as well. So
good attitude.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about the summit and I guess the impact one I had on myself, but one of the early conversations that you had there was around the young guys that saw the expensive car and you said, hang on, mate, you could have this if you just sold your ute. And I can only talk this one-on-one for clients, but I feel like when you've done it yourself, you're in a position to give that advice.
Yeah, 100%.
And anyone that knows my story, I had a brand new Golf GTI, top of the line, and I was chewing up borrowing capacity because, you know, you did the thing, you leased it through the company, for example, and I sold it into a dealership that walked out with like a 15-year Mazda 3 and a check, right? And it's like you can only give that advice when you've taken it yourself. You did it, and you're giving these guys the advice to go, hey, mate, take your expensive ute, trade it in for a usable vehicle, but then go and invest that money.
Yeah. Okay, so to break that story down a little bit as well, that was literally when I was shopping for my first Ferrari, and that young fella was my partner Morgan. It was her brother.
Right.
And he was having a conversation with one of his mates, and they were sitting outside gym, and this Lamborghini drove past, and his mate goes, man, that'll never be us, right? It'll never be us. And Bailey's just like, listen to it, and he goes, oh yeah, you're probably right, man. And then Bailey told me that story when we were driving back from Ferrari, and I'm like, why? He goes, what do you mean? I go, why will that never be you? He goes, oh, like, you know, we only make 100 grand a year. I go, bro, you're 23, 24, whatever. Like, you're making great money for your age.
Yeah.
Look at me, dude. And at the time, I think I was 32, 33, something like that. I'm like, dude, we're driving back from Ferrari. If there was anyone literally in the world that did not have a right to buy a Ferrari, from where high school dropout, no uni degree, no trade, like none of this sort of stuff behind me. If there's anyone that did not deserve the Ferrari, it's me. You know what I mean? And here I am driving back, like we're shopping for one at the moment. And he's like, oh, and he had this light bulb moment. And that's when I said to him, you got to sell the ute, man. I go, if you're committed to this thing, like if you actually want to create this thing, if you want to have that by the time you're 30, or have the option to have it if you want by the time you're 30, you got to sell the ute. And we had this chat about this thing for probably about 15, 20 minutes. And you never know if these sorts of things sink in, right? You're going to love this story. There's a reason why I was smiling before when you were telling me this. And the reason I was explaining at the summit was he sold that ute and he got like 55 grand for it or whatever. He bought it like 20, paid it off, was lucky. COVID was a fortunate thing for him. The secondhand market was still pretty strong. He bought his first property not long after we had that conversation. I was smiling so much because we're recording this, I think it's on the 14th of October, I think. His podcast comes out next week. I recorded it with him last week.
Yeah.
12 months almost to the day from when he bought his first property. He's just settled on his third deal.
That's incredible.
This is a kid with no money, no belief, no idea on how to actually do this thing. And he's just bought his third property. He's sitting at almost $500,000 worth of equity in 12 months.
That's insane.
Craziest part of this story, his mate that said to him, we'll never do that. That'll never be us. He has just released equity from his second deal, and he's just about to buy his third deal. So he went off and sold his ute after he saw Bailey do it. He's gone and bought his first one, equity released to then buy the second, and then done the same thing. He's about to buy his third. He will do his third in sub 12 months. So here's these kids that are 24, 25, making 80 to 100 grand a year, thinking it's not possible. They kind of blew that first, well, not blew their chance, but like they went down a different route when they were 21, right? But then they've paid this thing off. They've sold it. They've go, no, you know what? We understand it. They've sold it, started the journey, and then here in a 12-month window, like those things I said before, they're not throwaway comments. You know what I mean? Like these are real stories of guys that have actually achieved these things as well.
I love it.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
You think about the impact that has. Like I talk about the ripple effect.
Yeah.
You do it here, and you're talking to Bailey. That's a ripple effect that his mates. And then I hear this story, and that story is in front of 450 people that day. Yeah. And I have my conversation, and this ripple effect just gets bigger and bigger. I'm like,
how many
like
thousands of people does it touch, right?
Right. It's, and I think it's challenging some social norms, which is, hey, mate, you got a good income, go and get a car lease. It's pretty easy, or a car loan, and go and buy the new car and drive it off the lot, and away you go. And just because you can doesn't mean you have to or you should.
And I think, man, social media is like, it's definitely like warped a lot of people's perceptions around this side of things too. When you're young, you're always hungry to buy a car and look like you got more money than you have.
Well, it's the only piece, I say it's the only piece of real estate you can afford at that point.
Yeah, right.
I talk about like when you're like a teenager your hair's your real estate. That's the only thing that you can control, right? So the fancy haircuts. And then you go into your 20s and like the only piece of real estate you can just drive around and is I can afford to buy a vehicle. And then actual property real estate is only reserved for like late 20s if you're able to, right? And median first home buyer age is 37. So it's really not able, like you can not get real estate until you're like mid to late 30s sometimes on average. So
that's if you're in the average, man. Beat the average. Don't be the average. If everyone's doing that and they're going buying that car, like they're allowing you to borrow that money to buy the car because they know that within 4 to 5 years you can pay it back. So if you can pay it out with balloons and all the rest of the bullshit, a $50,000 car is actually going to cost you what, $80,000? There you go, $70,000. That means within a 4-year window, at worst, you're going to save yourself a $70,000 deposit. What can you do in 2 or 3 years, or even 1 to 2 years if you save your ass off and sacrifice and maybe get that second job? You know, like all these sorts of things, man. If you can bring this stuff forward, the craziest part of it is like you're acting rich, right? Buying that stuff, you're acting rich. You're acting like you have money that you don't have. But then what happens in like 5 years when you actually do have it, right? And you have generated, like you look at Bailey's story before and Kyle, his mate, same thing. Man, in 4 or 5 years, instead of having paid off that $50,000 car, you could be selling that first property and banking $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 worth of profit. What are you going and buying now? If that's what you really want to do and you go, you know what, I'm going to scale this thing, keep growing, keep building it. But where I'm going to treat myself is when it is time to sell that first deal. the one little thing I'm going to do for myself is I'm going to go buy something, right? And I buy something at that point. I mean, if we're talking $200,000-$300,000, you're buying a C63. You might be buying a 2-year-old G-Wagon or something, right? In cash, without the debt. And I think this is where, man, like changing the norm in thinking around all this sort of stuff. It's what changes the game. And I think when people really buy into this side of things, they realize what's possible. And again, you look at me, I have no right to do what I've done except for grit, determination, and sacrifice.
Yeah.
They had no right really to kind of do it either compared to the norms, like you're saying, like 36, 37.
Yeah.
And now look, they're under their third deal. Like what are the stats of 25-year-olds that have 3 properties under their belt?
Oh.
It'd be less than 0.1%.
Right.
You know, so to me, that's more impressive than acting rich on social media. Because at the end of the day, anyone who knows anything, they know you're fake. Like they know it's leased and all the rest of this sort of stuff. Like actually generate wealth, man. And like there's nothing more impressive to me than that. Because the amount of, again, sacrifice, determination, grit that has to go into it, it's unmatched.
Mate, spot on. You just touched on 2 words there. One is acting rich and the other one's actually being wealthy. And there's such a clear distinction between the two.
100%.
Yeah, rich is what you see on the outside. Wealth is what, when we sit in a room full of investors and people, you put your hand up if you've got more than 10 properties. And I see these people, I'm like, I don't see a designer label belt on these people or fancy shoes. I'm like, they walk amongst us. Yeah. They don't need to beat their chest. And it's actually the quiet millionaires that, that go amongst us, especially in a community like what you've got, that I'm like, this is special, mate, where that's celebrated as well. Yeah. That type of success.
Yeah, I love it, man. That was the coolest thing about the summit, man, was like, I think we asked everyone who was a property investor put their hands up. It was like 90% of the room put up. We asked how many people are from interstate. 80% of the people put their hands up. You know what I mean? It's like there's saying you're going to do things and then there's traveling interstate. There's doing all these things to the Gold Coast in April, man. Like it's not an easy place to get to.
If you're listening and you don't know what we're talking about here, Australian Property Scout had their first ever property summit. So it was face-to-face live interaction on the Gold Coast on a Saturday, I believe. I turned up there with my brother, a couple of mates, clients, and I got to tell you, mate, I didn't know what to expect. And I walk into a room of 450 people on a Saturday, and at the break, I'm like, oh, so whereabouts are you from? Oh, I'm from Perth. I'm from Wodonga. I'm like, have you paid to get here? They're like, yeah, I just flew in. This is crazy. What you did for the Gold Coast economy was insane, by the way.
Give it a nice injection.
Right. And then I start talking to them like, yeah, man, got a few properties, bought this through APS, bought this through another buyer's agent. That didn't work out well, so I've switched across here. And it was almost like, you don't want to say cult, but it was like such an affiliation, such a following that they've really engaged with what you guys are doing. Like you can't just create that overnight. That takes deep work to build a community. I say you got faceless Facebook groups and you don't know who you're taking advice from. You put people around each other and they want to see each other do well. And something that I thought in the breaks when I was talking to people, they just genuinely want to see other people do well. Yeah. I'm like, that is damn special. Something that I love about our clients where they're willing to help each other out. Rising tide lifts all ships.
100%.
When you have enough abundance, you want to give more to others as well. So there's this real mindset around that. And that's why I really wanted this episode, because on a next summit that's coming up in November in Sydney, it's non-negotiable. Like for me and my team and a number of clients, this is non-negotiable for us. You want to be around like-minded people. Like I just went to the fitness expo on the weekend. Yeah. And Bernie's like, we took our 2 kids, we have child minding. I'm like, bring them all. And just the people that are around there just want to raise the bar personally. And this is what people want to do. They want to raise the bar. They're going to invest themselves in a weekend in November. It's like, who do you want to be around?
Yeah.
Seriously, that you actually say you want the results, you got to prove it.
Man, that's one of the biggest things that I always say as well. The amount of people that will invest with us, and realistically, you invest with us over long term. You're going to spend literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're working closely with someone who's building your financial future. To commit 1 or 2 days on a weekend, like once or twice a year, to be around that and to get the hype from that, and then to learn all the different strategies and how to implement it. And again, man, build your circle of influence with the right people. The amount of people that were there. One of the you probably remember, one of the guys got up and said, "Man, I think it was a dude from like Albury Wodonga sort of way," and he's like, "Man, like, what if no one around you is like this, and I'm isolated?" I go, "Man, walk around and like say who's around here, who's from the Riverina or who's from this area, that I can catch up with, or he's not that far from Melbourne, or, all these sort of places that, all right, it's a little bit, but it's not that far in terms of like being able to have those connections with people and meeting people who are like-minded and you can push each other." And I find, even when I look at my own journey, in both in business and in property, I was always like aspiring to the next level that was in front of me. And I'd talk to people that were at the same level as me. And then I'm trying to learn from the people who are in front of me. And I think, man, like I find it blows my mind that people will when you invest, man, you're investing millions, right? Even though not all of it is potentially your money, you're borrowing a bit from the banks, but you're investing millions, but you want to do it as like almost like a weekend warrior, or like, oh, I'll listen to a potty here, potty there, whatever. And then you get people trying to go out there and buy themselves, and they've never researched, and they go, oh yeah, I'll go out, I'll buy this, whatever. But then they're not properly investing in what the actual journey can produce. And I think the difference and the real reason I wanted to do the summit, right, and kind of bring people together, was to show people how many other people are there trying to push and raise the bar and go to this different level. And man, they'd be surprised how many people out there that are like pushing harder than them. And then it almost is like a bit of a reality check on you. It's like, man, maybe I'm not going as hard as I could.
That's exactly what I got. And I pushed.
Yeah, man. 100%. Actually, yeah, you said that. You said that to me. It was a light bulb moment for you when you were there. And man, I think it's just like when you surround yourself with that, even if it's just the event, even if you're a bit of an introvert and you don't really want to talk to people and get that, I think exposing yourself to what is there and available and what other people are doing and how many other people are actually on this similar journey as well. That in itself is invigorating. You know what I mean? That in itself will push you to another level. Man, and that's what I really wanted to do it for, because I know when I started it, I didn't really have anyone to talk to. My whole circle, like no one did it. Literally no one in my circle invested. My family didn't invest. None of my mates invested. I was doing it. I was learning everything. I was reading the magazines. It was before bloody podcast or anything. And man, I was doing it. I was doing it all myself. And that's where I love the podcast side of things, man. I love what you do. That's what we do as well, to try to build this thing and really empower people to be able to do it as well. But the idea of the summit, for one, it's to build all that belief that they can do it and filled in a room with other people that can do it. And you would know there's a lot of energy, man. There's a lot of hype in that room.
Crazy.
Not like the rah-rah hype, but the actual like, man, you can do this thing and this is how to actually do it. But then all the strategies and everything that went with it as well. And the actual breakdown, the real life breakdowns of portfolios and strategies that can be implemented on their portfolio. How to actually look at things as a top 0.1% investor, not someone who talks about it and maybe someone who runs a business about it and talks shit. I'm talking about someone who's actually done it and people who are on the stage have actually done it. How to go through it, how to assess these things, how to implement these strategies. Like the average Australian investor, not the average Australian income earner, how to invest like a top 1% in that. So, man, that's what I had to do it, man. And I had to do it again. And I'm just so excited to see how it goes again from that perspective. Because Sydney, man, different place, very central. 50% of our client base is from Sydney. So I'm very excited to see. But it's interesting because it'll be interesting to see the people who are committed and who come and are willing to invest a day or 2 days of their life to potentially change the financial future and the trajectory that they're on. Man, I knew we actually had been working together for over 12 months before you came to the summit. And you came to the summit and then you're on board and ready to buy. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Let me just give you some context as to.
Please.
I said this to you before. I'm not blowing any smoke, mate. We're close to it. Like, I mean, I've met countless buyers agents.
Yep.
I'm very close to the investing side. That summit changed a lot of the beliefs and a lot of the norms.
Yep.
One particularly, I mean, we went all in on business and we bought a large commercial site. Anyone that's listening knows that, Bernadette and my journey, we bought a large commercial site. It's going to be for our business, our team. And so we kind of a lot of eggs in one basket.
Yep.
And then you called up Nick, your accountant, and he said, look, you bought a commercial site. How long has it taken you out of the market for? He said, like, probably over 12 months. And I'm sitting there with this feeling in my stomach, just getting sick, just going, bro. That's just us, like we look at how much we've sunk in. And yeah, sure, it's a good property. You've got it revalued. It's gone up in value, no doubt. But it's the equivalent of like maybe buying 8, 9, 10 investment properties, and it's locked us out of all those opportunities. And I came back. Bernie wasn't with me. It was my brother. My brother dropped me at the airport. I was like, dude, just that one little part changed how I look. So we said, no, I'm not moving in. Bernie and I are going to do an episode on our commercial kind of shift. And I said, no, mate, we've got to double down on this. We had acquisitions in the business, for example. So we put a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of energy into the business side. And that's where the penny really dropped for me, which is you've got sweat equity and you've got property equity. We've been heavy on sweat equity, which is in our business, roll up our sleeves, grow, for example, revenue, try and eke out profit, for example. The deal that we did in Perth, that was revalued in about 3 months, 100 grand increase. For me to pull out 100 grand in the business, that's pure sweat equity.
Yeah.
That's maybe a team member that's optimizing for profit. That means more clients, more delivery. Love doing it at all. But there's a price to be paid for that to eke out 100 grand versus I did nothing. We got the loan approved. I asked my team to revalue it. I got 3 valuations done and they all came back really, really high. And it's the blessing of having multiple valuations at my fingertips. And that's where I've said to people, I'm like, don't take anyone else's word for it. Take my word for it. Here's what's been done. Black and white. I can show you hand on heart. This is our performance and our result. And I said, and that's why Bernie and I have really been focused on, and it's allowed Bernadette to take time off work.
Yeah.
Honestly, like
that's crazy, man.
The ability for us to have property as a backstop to go, hey, man, we can generate income through our business, but we can also generate another revenue stream through properties, which we have, gives us choice and flexibility in life.
Yeah.
Isn't that what financial freedom's all about?
100%, man.
And so that was, to me, I'm like, I came back from the team, and it's hard when you go to something like this, and I've done a lot of personal development, days. You come back on a high, then you step back into a normal environment, and everyone's frequency is a bit lower.
Yeah.
And the team were like, "What are you talking about, mate? It's Sam Gordon Kool-Aid. What are you sipping?" I said, "Mate,
something in the water on the Gold Coast.
You need to be there for the next one." So I've told our team, put out there to our clients, I'm like, if you're listening, we're going to open up opportunities for you guys to come along as well. But I said, you got to be there because that's the only time that you'll experience something like that where you're around like-minded people that are all playing a bigger game. And that's what I thought. To me, property investing, I feel it's 50% financial because it's driven by what you can do financially, borrowing capacity, equity. But the other 50% is mindset. The team, who you've got on the team, who's believing in you. And also I think it really holds up a mirror to like, have you got the, I want to say balls, but have you got the kahunas?
Yeah.
To really go all in on this and achieve what you're really capable of hitting that as a potential to build a portfolio. And to me, I'm like, you need people that believe in you as well.
Yeah, 100%. Dude, I think you have a look at the stats, right? It's something like 92% of property investors in Australia own 1 or 2 properties and they get stuck and that's it. And the reason they get stuck is because they don't surround themselves with the right people and they're operating at that, you're talking about the frequency at which you are operating at. And there's operating at a high frequency and there's operating at the 92% of everyone else, you know what I mean? Or more. Realistically, it's probably more, right? And I think this is the crazy thing, man. When you change that, when you have that paradigm shift and when you realize what actually is potential and when you're willing to hook in and actually change the game and change your outlook on it, so much is possible, and there is so much potential out there. This is a crazy thing, man. Just to do things simply, but win. And I think when you surround yourself with the right team, see, this is the thing, I say simple, but like the average person, we would tell them the way that we invest or potentially the way the strategy and all the rest of it, and it blows most people's minds because for us, it's simple. But when you have the right team around you, executing that simple strategy and game plan, man, that's how you win. And that's how you enter. Look at that 92% of people never get past 1 or 2 properties. He's a 24-year-old kid, sells his ute and gets there in 12 months. You know what I mean? Doing something different. And I think, man, I just agree with you completely on it. It's man, it's one of these things. It's exactly what you said. It's like one of those, it changed the direction in your life in the way you look at things. And business can be a great vehicle, man. You can make great money as an employee,
Absolutely.
as an employer, whatever you are out there. But I think having that secondary income stream or that secondary wealth creation vehicle, everyone has to have it. Whether you're making $1 million a year or whether you're making 50 grand a year, you have to have it.
That's
because
spot on.
almost everyone lives within their means. If you're making 50, you live within 50. If you're making a mil, you live within a mil. Or majority of people do. And I think this is where, man, like you have to build that secondary stream, or when you stop working, that income stops coming in. You have to build it out and replace it sometime.
Sam, it's not only when you stop working. I've got friends that are like in some really good positions now. From uni, they've gone on to like some really high level, even C-suite, for example. And I'm telling them, mate, this is the reason you actually need to invest more than ever.
Yeah.
You're one pen flick away from losing that job, and that's a serious income that you're on.
Yeah.
You're actually far more in a riskier position than someone at maybe 60, 70, 80K because you can find a role there. When you're 200, 300, 400K, those roles are harder to come by. And the time out of the market's actually, you got to sing for your supper at that point. Multiple interviews. You've got the borrowing capacity. It almost feels a little bit below them to be buying 400, 500K properties, right? It's like to the ego, it's like, maybe we should be buying far more expensive properties in blue chip areas, which we'll come back into a second. And it's telling them, hey, mate, get in, buy quality, and you can scale a portfolio as well. So it's not necessarily quantity for the ego, but it's quantity because it gives you more revenue streams as well. Yeah. And I'm telling them, and they're slowly starting to learn, and by investing in their time and resources into like this and your podcast and videos, they're starting to understand that, earning 300-400K is a privilege, but it's not a guarantee either.
Yeah. Man, I'll tell one little story before we move on. I know you were going to move past this, but man, it reminds me of one of my best mates. When I started the business, all I wanted to do was make the same money as him. Yeah. And in his biggest years in real estate, he was making a little bit over 300 grand a year in sales in Sydney. And I was like, man, you need to invest this, dude. I was making like 80 grand a year, right? Making 80 grand a year. I had like a $4 or $5 million portfolio.
Making 80 grand, trying to tell someone on 300 grand what to do, right?
100%. And he's like, oh no, it's all good. Like, you know, you can always be able to make this money sort of thing. And I go, man, you don't know when this market's going to stop. And when it stops, like what's going to happen? And then, man, he made, I think he did 2 years around that, like 300, 350, both years. And then Sydney fell off a cliff. And for 3 years, he was struggling, man. And he started jumping around agencies and he could barely get a listing, he could get listings, but he could barely get a sale because people weren't buying, market had tanked. And man, for like 3 years, he dropped to like just a really, really low income because he couldn't get the sales up. And yeah, man, he was in new home sales, right? Not house and lands. It was he was working for a builder, so he was selling new builds to people with vacant lands and knockdown rebuilds and stuff. And when the going's good, man, when the market's good, they fly off the shelf,
absolutely.
Right?
You don't even need to sell them; they just turn up and buy it. Yeah,
exactly, dude. And then when it all changes, it all changes. And so yeah, man. Then I remember he said to me, like, this was only a year or two ago when he started buying a couple of deals for us. Yeah, man. And he goes, mate, I wish I could go back and rewind the clock to when I was making that income and do what you told me to do. But it was before I was a buyer's agent. This was probably 2016, 2017 when Sydney was pumping, and I was like, dude, you got to be doing this stuff. And yeah, mate, yeah. You never know how long that big income's going to last. You just never know. And you've got to build that out at the same time to make sure you're going to get that result.
Yeah, spot on. There's something else that you mentioned, which is like the overconfidence of investors. They bought a few, then they're like, hey, mate, I don't need you guys. Thank you very much. And it's the word that I've come to research, which is called hubris.
Okay.
So hubris is when you get overconfident.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so like, thanks guys, you got me to this point, but I'll take it from here.
Yeah.
And then he said, so, yeah, they come back. And it's cool. You welcome back with open arms.
Yeah,
so it's like, welcome back to the family, you prodigal son. But take us through, like you might see a bit of this hubris in action, right? Where it's like this overconfidence and then something goes amiss.
Yeah, man. I've seen it happen a bit, kind of on both, like a couple of different sides. There's one side that probably, I don't know, I've actually never kind of really spoken about this before, but I've seen over the last probably like 12 months, probably about half a dozen of our clients over the last few years have actually gone on and they've started their own buyers agencies.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm like, dude, you've never bought a property. You've never actually bought a property. And it's one of the biggest things that most people need to be aware of these days is if they're using a BA, if they've been established for a while, how actually reputable they are, because there's a lot of BAs have been around for a long time.
A lot of BAs.
That are the worst, that have been around for a long time. But then there's a lot that have started up in the last couple of years that just have no actual experience. And man,
their experience is they've bought a few their portfolios X and they've used a buyer's agent to get there.
Yeah. And this is and this is the thing, man. It's like the experience has been around the back end process and then managing a property and all the rest of sort of stuff, but it hasn't been the actual sourcing component. So man, I don't know if this is the kind of if it's all right to kind of go down this avenue, but it's been interesting to see that, because I remember reading about it a few years ago with other BAs who came off, like, you know, some of your big guys back in the day. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, they never even really bought, and then we've seen it happen a little bit with us. And I'm like, it just blows my mind that people think they can do it when they literally have never even bought a property before. But then you see some guys, they kind of they want to trial different buyers agents that are singing the dream and all the rest of sort of stuff. And man, almost always we see that overpromise, the under-deliver, and then they're coming back to us, you know, and saying they weren't able to get me. What are you getting? One of the things I laugh about the most is other buyers agents out there trying to say buying below market is a myth. Mate, I just laugh. You know what I mean? It's like, it's because they just don't know how to do it. You know what I mean? It's like there's buyer's agents and there's buyer's agents. You know what I mean? And the vast majority will actually say you can't because they don't understand how to do it. And I'm not saying that in a vain way. I'm saying that from 15 years of experience and building my entire portfolio myself and knowing what you can do out there. And people saying it's a myth, they just don't understand the actual components around it. And so yeah, man, it's one of these things. There's knowing how to actually buy really well and buy properly and understanding everything to do with it. And then just buying a property. Yeah, there's a reason why I think it's 98% of transactions in America have two people on each side of the transaction. There's a buyer's agent and there's a selling agent. Yeah. It's because selling agents are professionals and they literally spend their entire lives selling people for more money than they probably should pay into shit. But in Australia, we seem to have this inclination or this belief that we know how to buy property because it's the great Australian dream, right? And I think it's just a funny thing to kind of, I guess, actually sit there and think about. Like 99.9% of Australian properties are sold through a selling agent, but it's a very small number that are bought through a buyer's agent. Obviously, that number is ticking up these days. Yeah. But yeah, man, it's an interesting thing to kind of think about and watch. And I think even with myself, being a buyer's agent, some of my deals were really good, like crazy, right? But then probably the majority, or at least 50-50 of the deals that I also put into my portfolio are equivalent or not as good as what we buy for clients day in, day out now. And different times in the market as well. It is a much harder time to buy in the marketplace right now.
Why do you say it's harder?
We're in a massive stock deficit. We've been in a massive stock deficit since 6 months into COVID. COVID hit. People who didn't need to sell pulled their markets off the property. People who did need to sell sold, and they sold at a loss. Probably the best buying I've ever had in my life. Yeah, okay. And then once that happened, there was no stock. And we have really struggled to catch up from that stock deficit point for a long time. And then there's a lot of other buyers. There's a lot more buyers agents in the market now as well. A lot of people actively sort of going out there and sourcing. So yeah, man, it is a much harder time to buy right now because almost everything is selling on market unless you have connections. So not over 90% of what we buy every single month. Since January 23, we're now in October 2024. There's been 2 months in the last, whatever that is, 20 odd months, 22 months, where we have bought less than 90%. One was 88 and one was 81%. Everything else is 90% plus off market. Wow. So 9 out of 10 properties you would never even see that we buy every single month. And some months it's high, it's like 95, 96%. Yeah. So it's like 1 in 20 deals we're buying on market. And a lot of the time it's an agent calls us that we know, it says, this thing's crashed twice, they need to sell at this money, can you do it? And it's like, it's a stonker, you know what I mean? Because they've had to cut to sell. So there's very different abilities of buying out there. And it's just experience, man. That's all it is. And I think people just got to be really wary what they're doing out there, especially if they're trying to do it themselves. You have to spend the time, man. You can't just log on to realestate.com and then think you're getting a great deal. It doesn't work like that. It's so many intricacies to actually being really good at it. And I actually feel a little bit sorry for people out there like trying to go it themselves, or maybe they can't afford a BA, or they think, you know, that they kind of don't want to spend it. That would have been me 15 years ago. And it's sad because it's just not as easy as it once was. But I look at myself, all the way back then compared to now, there's no comparisons. And it would be very, very hard to try and cut your teeth and learn now in this marketplace. You would have to just be patient and just be okay to sit in the sidelines for 6 to 12 months while you were trialing and trying to learn it and get deals and stuff like that, because there's no shortcut. We were talking before about shortcuts. You know, there's no shortcut to knowing how to buy a deal properly and buy well.